So on Wednesday night, we got the big ice chant that the Las Vegas crowd engaged in during the main event between MJF and Brody King. And I can't say I was too surprised that this got picked up on a lot, but there were a lot of mainstream outlets that focused on this, from TMZ, NBC News, lot of different places that covered this whole thing. And like you asked the question about like these chants following Brody King, I think this is going to be follow all of his matches. And it is kind of interesting to look at something that, you know, it is very rare that AEW crosses over in some way, but there is sort of this moment right now, and sometimes this happens with just pure luck or timing. But all of a sudden, Brody King is kind of in this unique position, and I don't know if that necessarily spurs you on to do anything if you are AEW, but I do think like this is going to be like this guy is going to sort of be the representative, this anti-ice figure that is going to be on AEW, and it's sort of branding AEW to the outside world. Like I just saw a lot of responses to people that were kind of just looking at, wow, pro wrestling is an outlet that people are speaking out against ice over. And, you know, we'll see how, you know, significant this is for Brody King. But this is a guy that, I mean, he is going into a very significant match next weekend. And I think he's going to get a fair amount of attention over this next week coming out of this, even though it was like, you know, he kind of got the ball rolling on this for these audiences to follow. And I think we will 100% get that when they're, you know, in a place like California on Wednesday night, and then Australia next weekend. But these crowds will be interesting because I definitely see these chants continuing.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it now. You know, this is now not just necessarily something within our bubble, but it's something that's mainstream. It, like when I checked, even on Wednesday night, it was at the top of Reddit on all, you know, which is everything. It's one of the biggest, I think, news items that's been attached to AEW, period. In reading about a lot of the comments, it's people finding out about AEW for the first time as some sort of alternative to the WWE. And so if I was Tony, like, you run with this, this is something that you can't plan for. And just like, you know, it's something very special.
This has fallen into your lap. And that becomes the question here is that I think you and I can both observe from this television of late, like I feel in my head that Tony has his world title picture booked for months. And not necessarily saying like you flip the title here, but this is something like they have something here with Brody King. And the question is like, yes, you can have him do a super competitive match. He comes up short, but I don't think you wanted like, this could be fleeting, and there's something here that you have with Brody King, and I think it makes that match next week rather a lot more interesting. And it's the question like, how do we capitalize on this as well?
I think he could lose at Grand Slam, and then you do a rematch. Well, hold on a second. Can you do a rematch because you already have Andrade or
it's like everything is set up at this point for?
Yeah, that's a bit tough.
Like, could you imagine, like, just throwing this out? And believe me, I wouldn't have been thinking this way on Wednesday, but like the idea for like Brody King winning this title and your Revolution pay-per-view is in Los Angeles of all places.
Yeah. I think you should do three-way. This might be an opportunity for that. You know, disputed finish at Grand Slam somehow enters Brody King into the match. Maybe Andrade is that person, you know, who goes up against MJF and having Brody there. And it's not like anybody has to figuratively represent ice like in that, but it's just simply having Brody King on that stage in that moment in Los Angeles and getting the like that chant, you know, to be present again, just for what it might represent in the moment beyond the bounds of professional wrestling. I think it would be such a great thing for AEW, really.
Yeah, it's sort of just this thing that caught fire over these last 2 days. And it's like you would have to be like totally having your head in the sand to not observe this, and it being like a rare moment that it feels like AEW has kind of like punctured the public consciousness over something that I think generally there is a lot of the public that just does want to see some kind of resistance to this. And, it's as silly as like a wrestling venue with wrestling fans chanting this. Like, it's something that obviously was a loud statement.
It looks silly on the surface, sure. Like when you think about maybe what still, like to this day, the mainstream might think about when they think about, men in their underwear fighting each other, like, acting, right? But wrestling continues to represent like one of the few forums in life where you can gather and chant something in unison, to like make on like to make its way onto TV, and therefore like
is this chant going to make it onto the UFC broadcast? Are the MMA fans going to engage in this chant?
I'm not so sure about that. No, but like wrestling audiences are conditioned to like express their opinion, and that isn't necessarily tied to wrestling story. It's about real life as well. Brody King is really the perfect representation, and I would have him be AEW champion, even for a short stint before you pick things back up, heading to All In. But you run with this as hard as you can. This is just it's like an incredible gift, not just for Brody King, but for AEW. A lot of the discussion I think I saw was about continued growing dissatisfaction with the WWE from seeing their ties to the current administration. And this is something that is providing the perfect sort of like, PR message to let people know that this is the antidote to counter that. So again, we don't exactly know what sort of political affiliation Tony Khan might have, but we do know that like he's willing to allow people like this. At one time he allowed Brody King to come out wearing that Abolish ICE shirt. He's allowed Hangman Page, to represent, I would say at least a portion of maybe that side of politics. So I really feel like this is a great opportunity for AEW.
Yeah. And we brought this topic up on Wednesday and we haven't mentioned it yet though. A big component of all this as well is WBD and how attached to something like this. Like this is certainly, I am sure Wednesday night they were very aware of this and could only have been more aware of it over these last two nights. So that's an interesting aspect to all of this. I do also want to mention.
Do the chants get bleeped next time?
That would be that would be
because you've had MJF like even publicly state we're not the company that bleeps their chants. However, just simply like
WBD itself and TBS would come off really badly censoring these chants after this happened because that becomes the story after Wednesday next week if that would be the case.
But do they not have a duty to like the FCC to like if they recognize something is cussing on air simply for that reason when they have a duty to censor?
It's not an issue with like it's not like an FCC issue. It's going to be based on the guidelines of the network of what they like. Obviously, like Wednesday came and went, and they like those went uncensored, and there was and we heard from people watching. Like we were watching Triller, but they did not censor them on TBS either. Yeah. Like it is a question. Like you could argue they were not expecting those chants on Wednesday. You have to be expecting them this Wednesday. If Brody King is on there.
Is Collision live? The Grand Slam show?
No,
it's not. Right?
No, Grand Slam is. No,
it's
Grand Slam would be on a tape delay. Yeah.
So I mean, if there's a chant, for Grand Slam,
but Wednesday show, like we'll get a good sense, like if there's any like hesitation, like even if they keep Brody King backstage or something. I mean that would be telling in and of itself. We do have to mention though the fact that Bryce Remsburg took all credit here for the fact that he delayed ringing the bell once he sensed what the chant was so that it could prolong the chant itself. And, there are some people that will like really just kind of tiptoe around this stuff or try to stay away from it. Bryce has dug in like he's all in on this and he's, he's donating proceeds from his cameos to the Lancaster Neighbor Fund. He's just like, he has clearly attached himself to all of this. I think Bryce came out of this as the guy really endeared himself, I think, to a lot of fans just based on something so simple as like he picked up on this and he just delayed the start of the match.
Yeah. I mean,
And the announcers laid out too. Like, I don't know like how purposeful that was, but like they did not talk over the chants. Like they let it breathe and make sure everyone could realize what this chant was.
It's this coupled with like, you know, what MJF's saying about it, that really makes this sentiment feel like it's a company supported message rather than just fans going rogue, right? Like this is, even if Tony isn't, I don't know if he's been pressed about it, but like I imagine he will soon. He does plenty of interviews.
He was doing media, but with the Super Bowl stuff this week, but I didn't hear the topic be asked about him.
And you can almost exactly expect what he's going to say anyway, right?
He's going to say exactly what he did at that press conference in Toronto, that he's going to let his performers be their genuine selves, and he's not going to stop them from saying that. Sure. Now, if it was the other, you know, it would be an interesting test of that. Like if there was a message that, you know, was not so favorably received by the audience, like how that would be met. Like I think ultimately, like the audience would share its dissatisfaction if this were, you know, like a pro ice message for something like that. I think you somewhat read the room, but this has generally been received pretty well. Like I'm sure there's people that are outraged over this, but I don't think the AEW audience at large has been pushing back at any of this, and it's kind of broken Brody King and AEW through over the news cycle. February on the Post Wrestling Cafe, we continue our review of Season 2 of WWE Unreal, including a big look at Seth Rollins' fake injury, which culminated in his appearance at SummerSlam. We're going to be looking back at Shinya Hashimoto with a special career retrospective on Rewind Away, plus a review of Extreme Rules 2011, as John Cena announces to the WWE audience that Osama bin Laden has been compromised to a permanent end. We'll also take a look at New Beginning in Osaka, TNA No Surrender, and new members can take advantage of a 7-day free trial. Go to postwrestlingcafe.com and jump on board in February.